Good evening and greetings from the Harshaw House in the Catskill Mountains of New York. I'm Eric Francis Coppolino, your friendly neighborhood astrologer, the editor of Planet Waves, and the author of the Planet Waves horoscope, and also the host of Planet Waves FM on Pacifica Radio. I was researching tomorrow's program, not last night's program, yet tomorrow's program, and I clicked on a Facebook short of a woman talking about the Reichstag fire. I thought, isn't that this time of year? And it actually turns out that tomorrow is the 93rd anniversary of the Reichstag fire. That was the burning of the Houses of Parliament in Berlin in what was soon to be Nazi Germany. And this took place on February 27th, 1933. And I have long felt that this chart is one of the ugliest, darkest charts in all of astrology. Let's see if it stands up to that. It's certainly on my short list. And for those of you who don't know this, Hitler comes to power in late January of 1933. And the way that he comes to power is he convinces Hindenburg, who was the president, that he would be the right guy. Now, there's an argument that he was recruited for this and so forth. But Hindenburg appoints him chancellor, kind of like the prime minister. So Hindenburg is the president of Germany, the Weimar Republic, and Hitler gets the job as chancellor, kind of like the provost of Germany. And very quickly, and Hindenburg is on his last legs. He's only got a couple of months to live, and he's very sick, and he's not fully present. He's not really, sure what's exactly going on. But in any event, just 1 month after Hitler was appointed chancellor by the president of Germany, the Weimar Republic, that would be Lord Hindenburg, there was a terrible fire in the Houses of Parliament. Now, go figure, it just kind of burned down. And we know that the first fire call was to one of the Berlin firehouses at shortly after 9 o'clock. Now, I've seen a lot of shortly after charts. You don't know if shortly after, really, it's anywhere from 5 minutes to a quarter after. But fortunately, with this chart, it really doesn't matter. We have a chart. Now, what happens when the Reichstag burns down is that immediately Germany goes into emergency mode, and they pass various Reichstag laws. In fact, the very next day, there was the Reichstag Fire decree, wherein Hindenburg suspends constitutional protections in Germany. So all that had to happen was a kind of a 9/11 type of incident, which is exactly what this was. For its day, for its time, this was a 9/11 type of incident. And it seemed very convincing and very terrible and very shocking, and a big building was burning down, and the first thing that happened is that Hindenburg suspends the abundant constitutional protections in the then Weimar Republic German constitution. And so that's it. From that moment on, it's game on. And it's really chilling how easy it is to do this, because if a political leader, if a leader elected, appointed, nobody really elected Hitler. He was appointed chancellor by the president and was next in line of succession. If all it takes is an emergency to declare emergency protections, and if, quote unquote, protections, and if power is the goal, if power is the agenda, well, then all you need is an emergency. And it's very easy to make an emergency. And I don't know why people don't see through this. I'm starting to think that actually most people are pretty stupid or completely self-absorbed, or have beliefs that get in the way of their ability to think things through, their ability to learn things. And I realize that we do have this persistent preoccupation with Nazi Germany in American society. I think that's pretty interesting, given that, by many different metrics, the United States kind of swallows Nazi Germany in a thing called Operation Paperclip, where 1,000 or so of their best technical people and rocket scientists and technicians and chemists and scientists, and I'm sure many other people were imported and impregnated into the government to the point where a former colonel in the SS, who was himself the subject of a massive Project Paperclip, kind of rescue operation to get this guy out, Werner von Braun, out of Germany. He then heads up the NASA program, the Moon Mission program. So for those of you who think that the Moon Mission is some kind of a high credibility operation, just remember that it was headed by Werner von Braun, who was a colonel in the SS and the German secret police. And this actually does come out during the time of the Apollo mission, but Johnson is very clever and papers it over quickly, and they kind of forbid people from asking questions, and they had a sufficient, Operation Mockingbird had created a sufficient lock on the press by the late 60s that there was really no, it didn't stick. It didn't stick. But we end up with a full-on, red-blooded Nazi running the glorious American space program. So that does not argue well for its credibility, and neither does the Coke bottle on the moon. They don't make Coke on the moon. They don't sell Coke on the moon. They don't bring Coke in spaceships, and it wouldn't be outside if they did. All right, so what I'd like to do before I go on too much further longer here with my introduction is I'd like to take a look at this chart. But remember that this chart is set for 1 month after Hitler is appointed chancellor, and it is the day before the Reichstag Fire decree, and then there were later Reichstag laws, and then it is then only a month later, Dachau, the concentration camp, opens in München. It opens just 1 month later. They open, and then in April, just 3 months after this, there are anti-fascist, communists, anti-fascists who were killed in the Ilversgehofen neighborhood, and there is a concentration camp established in the Ilversgehofen neighborhood of Erfurt. I have been there, and the psychology of this is chilling because it was an open-air torture camp in a vacant lot in the middle of 10 or 15 apartment blocks with a cinema on the same property. And the people who were hanging by their arms from poles, being tortured, were perfectly visible to the people coming and going from the cinema and everyone looking down from their apartment windows. Now, you can imagine the psychology of this is perfect, right? You're not going to say anything because you're going to end up down there, and you don't want to end up down there. So what you do is you don't say anything, and that's the psychology that is being attempted to be used now. I suspect for as lazy as many Americans are, that we do have a little more pluck and resolve than the Germans did in 1933, but also we're not showing very much of it. We're not showing very much courage. I think most people are pretty passive. But let's see what this chart says. So there's a lot of ways to start looking at a chart, but right away we see that get a little more light on the subject here. Right away, we see that in the house associated with government, the 10th house, is Pluto, right tucked onto that angle. This is probably a pretty good time of the event, about 9:05. Pluto is on the 10th. The 10th house is government. The government is the thing that wields power over the people. It wields corporate power, and the definition of fascism is a merger of corporate interests with a right-wing government. That's the definition. That's Mussolini's, and that's the standard working definition of fascism. But as Mussolini said, it should be corporatism, and the corporatism house is the 10th house. We've got this very dark, scary, retrograde Pluto in Cancer. on the 10th house, which is about absolute power wielded emotionally. Anything coming through Cancer is going to be wielded emotionally. Now then, I'm going to come to these lines in a second. I'm really going to read 3 or 4 parts of this chart. Here we see this cluster of planets in the 11th house. Well, 12th. Technically, it's the 12th, because if we're Libra rising, all of Libra's the first, and then all of, and I know this is the hard part if you're trained to read quadrant houses, but according to whole sign houses, and I'm not into whole sign houses as some kind of a doctrine, right? This is not about the law. This is about what is really true about this chart. We have this group here, which I've got enlarged. I'm going to look at it separately. Then I've enlarged this group here. We're going to look at that separately. So this is the 12th, secret enemy, the secret enemy. And this is, or the secret plan. And this is the 7th, which is the open enemy, but it's also in the zone of projection. We're going to work a little bit to decipher this, but this is extremely nefarious with this conjunction of Mars and Neptune in the 12th on the south node, a very old nefarious plan. And then we go to the 7th. We see Nessus is present in the 7th, plus the revolutionary disruptive influence of Uranus, plus the moon, all together. Now, this is in the house of open enemies, and what happened was the people were declared the enemy. I have no doubt in my mind from this chart, because this chart is so nefarious, that this was no accidental fire. This was an arson fire. You can tell because the markings of the plan and the intention to disrupt society are all over the place. And the next day, they knew exactly what to do. They invoked the Patriot Act, which was then called the Reichstag Decree, I think. The Reichstag Fire Decree. The next day, they take over and they suspend the Constitution and they jack the power of the executive. That's what this is. And remember, they're burning emotional fuel, Cancer. Now, if we look at this connection here, we see that Pluto is in a square to Uranus. So this Uranus-Pluto square, just like in 2011, just like for the Occupy Wall Street movement and the uprising in Madison, Wisconsin, and Arab Spring all take place in the same year, 2011, under the influence of an exact Uranus-Pluto square. In the square mix is Nessus, which is another nefarious, very Neptunian type of influence. It's kind of a very dark Neptune factor. When you see a Uranus-Pluto square, or any Uranus-Pluto 90 opposition or conjunction, there's a revolution going on. And the question always is, whose revolution is this? So you have to phrase it as a question. In the 1960s, it looked like the People's Revolution. And in the 1960s, John F. Kennedy, Malcolm X, Robert F. Kennedy Sr., and Martin Luther King are all killed. That's revolutionary. And in 1970, 4 students were shot at Kent State and several at other different campuses. And so essentially, one side in the 1960s was taking all the casualties in American culture. That was Uranus-Pluto conjunction, much more powerful than a square, but the square will do in a pinch. And to me, this is clearly the government's revolution. There's nothing here that says that this is the people's revolution. But in the spirit of the 7th house being a projection from the 1st house, we see that there is this highly disruptive and nefarious and aggressive conjunction of the moon, Uranus, and Neptune about to be set off by the moon and square Pluto. Okay, you following me along here? Now, there's a couple of other things before we go to an enlarged chart. We want to see the whole chart in context. Then I'll look at the sections, then we'll come back to it. In this chart, take a look at the degree value of Neptune. I've got it circled in green. It's 8 degrees and 49 minutes. And if we go to the sun is 8 degrees and 48. See, I've got it circled there, 8 degrees. I only can do this with one hand. 8 degrees and 48 minutes. The sun is opposite Neptune to a value of 1 arc minute. That is to say 1/60th of 1 degree. It's not get closer except to have it be exact, and then it's separating. When you have so much aspecting Neptune, for example, Mars conjunct Neptune, highly self-destructive, by the way, delusional. Mars conjunct Neptune is a troubling aspect. If you happen to have this aspect, drop me a note. I'm not saying that you're necessarily completely over the top with this aspect, but I will say that you have to address it. You have to deal with it. It's not the kind of thing you can have and not do something about it. Because it's affecting you, even if you don't know that it is. So we have this Sun-Neptune opposition, and we are also very close to a solar eclipse. You can tell there's a solar eclipse because the moon is near one of the lunar nodes. The sun is near one of the lunar nodes. Anytime the sun is near one of the lunar nodes, you know there are eclipses on the horizon or that they just happen, because eclipses can only happen with the sun near one of the lunar nodes, and it does not matter which one. All right, let's zoom in a little bit on this chart. So let's first look at the arrangement of this pattern. Now you see I've got Pluto up here, and I've got the little orange lines coming down. They land there. Okay, all right, let's go back to looking at this top. Let's look at the public side of the chart. So here we are again in whole sign house 12, because the chart is Libra rising. And that means no matter where these little lines are, all of Virgo is the 12th house. And what we see in the 12th house is a plan. You know it's a plan because it's on the south node. And you know that it's an old plan because it's on the south node. And you know that it involves deception because there's Neptune. And you know that it involves very aggressive, toxic deception because it is Mars conjunct Neptune. And Jupiter is in there providing a lot of benefit. Somebody's going to make a lot of money on this. But look, all these planets are retrograde. And so it is hidden, concealed. And it is concealed by the 12th as well. So it's concealed twice. And this fooled a lot of people. It's still fooling people today. I saw this short presentation that I'm going to put on Planet Wave Stuff, and it was only 2 minutes. And the presenter says, ooh, and then the Reichstag Fire happened. And then they declared the Reichstag decree. And she doesn't even mention for a moment that the whole thing might have been complete horseshit, that the whole thing might have just been, it certainly might have been, a false flag operation blamed on the liberals. So it's a conservative government that's blaming everything on the liberals. And then they establish camps, and then they start blaming the Jews for everything. And while they're busy blaming the Jews for everything, they're rounding up everyone else as well as the Jews. So if you ever hear somebody say that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, please stop and correct them and say that actually, historically, we know that 12 million people were killed in the Holocaust, and half of them, not horoscope, Holocaust, and half of them were Jewish. We have to not just make this about one group of people. When the Sinti and Romani gypsies were wiped out, gay people were basically wiped out in France, intellectuals were wiped out, anyone not of, supposedly pure Aryan blood, which no one is, was wiped out. It was not just Jews, but it's important to know that the Jews were used as an excuse. Anti-Semitism was an excuse, but there's no excuse like poverty. And everything is fine until you don't have breakfast. Okay, so we have this whole business, this whole frightening, nefarious business. And like, you know, I mean, I know nobody has astrology books anymore, but look up Mars conjunct Neptune. I mean, this is as nasty as it gets. Really, it really is. All right. Now let's go to this other very important house, which is the seventh house. And we see on the cusp, right in the seventh here, is this triple conjunction. And the triple conjunction, it points back upward in the direction of Pluto. So all this is going to Pluto in the 10th. Retrograde. Again, covert. Retrograde says covert. When you see retrograde, think concealed, hidden, withdrawn, covert. Retrograde. And the past. Very basic. So here we have, first of all, the seventh is a highly sensitive house. It's where it's a very difficult house to read also, because the seventh is, there are people present in the seventh, and then the seventh is also a mask put on the first. And so in charts, for example, somebody like Bob Dylan, pardon me, Bob Dylan, who McLuhan would say was able to put on the public like a mask. People who are good at putting on the public like a mask have a very strong seventh house. And so there was already a feeling of restlessness. There was a feeling of agitation. There was a desire to blame with Nessus. There was a desire to blame the wrong person. There's a feeling of betrayal in the air. And then there's a Uranus-Pluto square going on. And the moon is just setting, visible on the horizon, when this fire breaks out. And then, of course, immediately, because the moon is so close to Uranus and Nessus, all hell breaks out instantly. And they take over and they open concentration camps and they start killing people. And then in May, there's a book burning. Books that are deemed un-German are publicly burned throughout Germany. And then July 14th, now we're only 3.5 months away from the Reichstag Fire, the law for the prevention of offspring with hereditary diseases is passed. New German law mandates the forced sterilization of individuals with physical and mental disabilities. This is a eugenics program. Okay, then in September, the Central Organization of Jews formed, which is supposedly to fight back. And then, okay, I was a little off on von Hindenburg. He dies in August of 1934. So Hindenburg, with Hitler as his henchman, is presiding over basically the fascifying of Germany and the rise of the National Socialist movement. And it all starts with the Reichstag Fire, and this is what it looks like. I mean, this is just very disturbing. But what this reeks of, especially in a house like the seventh, an angular house, is it reeks of intent. This whole chart, remember that this is the chart for the beginning of the Nazi movement. It's how they consolidated their power so fast. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we will admit that in the United States, the same thing happens, only it's a little subtler with the World Trade Center. At 9/11, the World Trade Center is so readily, openly understood to have been an inside job that you can even talk about it on YouTube. There are hundreds and hundreds of videos on YouTube about how the World Trade Center was an inside job, which means a false flag operation blamed on the wrong people. But the war goes to Afghanistan first, but really it goes to the American people with the Patriot Act. What did the American people do to create 9/11? But no, they have this massive grab back of civil rights, and suddenly we're taking our shoes off. And they set up the Real ID program back then, and we go into this kind of slow motion friendly fascism in the United States, and now we are seeing people being rounded up. Of course, they're undesirables. They're Mexicans. Until they clean your house or make your salad or build put a roof on your house, they're so-called undesirables, which is completely outrageous. But there's some modest objection to this roundup that's going on. But just today at Columbia University, a student was taken out of her dorm by ICE agents who were lying, who had fake NYPD shields and claimed to be NYPD. What, they don't have enough power without having a false flag operation? They've got to claim to be city cops with fake badges. You can buy them online at badgeandwallet.com. I mean, you too can try this. So anyway, this is basically what I see going on here. So there's several important parts, just to wrap up, several important parts of this chart. And I never really know how I'm coming across in this business of astrology, because it seems to go over people's heads so easily, and there's not the kind of tenacity and any abundance that it takes to learn how to do this. But you can learn how to do this, and this is the kind of thing we can do in a live class. I'll answer your questions in the comments. So we've got four main parts to this chart. We've got the sun's position here. By the way, this is in the 6th. If that's the 12th, then this is the 6th. And the 6th is the military. And so we've got the solar eclipse going from 12 to 6, and 6 is the house of the military. We've got Mercury there too. We see we've got Eris in early Aries. We know the radio era has begun, and no matter how many people he killed, Hitler would not have been able to come to power without radio. We see that he's putting on the fear, the anxiety, the agitation, the suspiciousness of the public as a mask in the 7th house. We see the outright power grab in the 10th house, but secret, emotionally driven, secret, retrograde, emotionally driven, Cancer, absolute power, Pluto in the 10th house of government power. Leo would be the 11th here. And then we're in the 11th, and we see this whole nefarious plan. I really hate this chart. I really wish I didn't have to have this chart in existence, but it's good that we have it. It's good that we're learning something from it. But to me, what this chart has is the grimy, sooty handprints of intent and of arson and of contempt for the people, and also for the people's fear of responsibility. And I'll end on this note. We could ask ourselves why totalitarian government is so, why it keeps coming back, why it's so popular, why it is a thing that people seem to gravitate toward. And the problem is that what we call freedom really means responsibility. Freedom means taking responsibility for yourself and your actions. Freedom is sold like it's some kind of a diet soft drink that doesn't have any negative effects, when in fact it is forcing insulin to be produced and contains aspartame, another fine product from Monsanto. And it is only toxic. It doesn't satisfy thirst. It's full of chemicals. It poisons people. It's got colors and caffeine, and mainly it's got aspartame. But that's the soft drink that we are sold as freedom. And we believe that in some way freedom is free, and everyone has their definition. Maybe you want to fire off shotguns in your backyard or have a big truck or something like that. No, that's not what freedom is about. Freedom is a part of a sacred relationship to existence, where you have the freedom that you earn through your choices and through your actions, which are largely going to be quite reserved, perhaps even in the traditional sense conservative, or something that you wage over another person, and that is not really freedom. All right, I will be back with a Planet Waves FM tomorrow. Usually goes up on the planetwaves.fm site at about 7 o'clock. If you want to get on the mailing list, get on the Substack for that show. That will be planetwavesfm.substack.com, and you'll get the show delivered to your inbox every Friday night at 7 o'clock. please, if you've listened this far, upvote this video, add a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're a very small player in astrology on YouTube. I think many newer and less experienced presenters get a hell of a lot more views than I do, but I can only do my best in gaming this algorithm and creating the programming that I create. All right. Again, thank you for joining me. Please add your comments below and look for me tomorrow night at 7 with Planet Waves FM. Signing off from the Harshaw House. Lots of love and bye for now. Ooh, lights out. Boom. Good. All right. Painting by Chris Hawkins. All right. Stop recording.